It was supposed to be the most secure room in the entire estate. A vault within a vault, lined with steel, protected by motion sensors, heat detectors, and a biometric lock that required both a thumbprint and a retinal scan. And yet, at precisely 3:47 a.m., the heart of Andara, a 78-carat flawless pink diamond worth $62 million, disappeared without a trace. No alarms were triggered, no cameras were blacked out, no windows were opened. The door was still locked from the inside, and the only person inside was found unconscious on the floor. I arrived on the scene just as dawn painted the sky a bruised purple. The estate's long driveway curled like a serpent through fog. Journalists were already clawing at the gates. The chief of security looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. "We don't understand," he kept muttering. "It's impossible. It's like the diamond vanished into air." I didn't respond. I rarely do at first. People tend to fill the silence with details they didn't mean to share, and I like to listen. The vault door was cold to the touch. Not a single fingerprint. The steel floor was spotless, the temperature stable, no signs of forced entry, no disturbed dust, no fingerprints out of place, except for one smudge, faint, near the handle of a small utility panel in the corner of the ceiling. Odd. That panel was supposed to be sealed, but it wasn't. The unconscious man was still sedated. Name, Julian Vexley. Security engineer. Former military. Clean record. No known debts. But I noted the faint bruise just beneath his jawline. Pressure point. Someone knew how to knock him out without leaving visible trauma. Someone skilled. Someone who knew the system better than anyone. Or someone who knew Julian. People lie. Rooms don't. And this room was screaming. Not with noise, but with gaps. Gaps in logic, gaps in space, gaps in what should have been. The question wasn't just who took the diamond, or how. The real question was, why did they make it look so impossible? Theft is a crime of opportunity, or so they say. But this was orchestration, precision, a performance so flawless it bordered on the surreal. The heart of Andara was no ordinary gem. It was legendary. And with its disappearance came not just panic, but whispers. Inside job, illusionist, ghost. My name is Elias Rook. I've spent the last 18 years listening to the way silence shifts in a room, watching liars breathe, and asking questions no one else dares to say aloud. And this case felt different from the moment I crossed that vault's threshold. The police were baffled. The owners were hysterical. The media was frothing with conspiracy. But I wasn't here for the headlines. I was here for the truth. The kind that doesn't tremble when you strip it bare. And if you're watching this, you're here for something more, too. You're not just a spectator. You're part of this investigation. As I walk you through every step, every alibi, every contradiction, every detail that doesn't sit quite right, I want you to ask yourself the same question I did that morning. Who had the most to gain from the impossible? Before we dive into the vault, take a moment. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a single case. Like this video if you want more stories from the darker corners of justice. And comment below. Tell me what city, what country you're watching from. Let's see how far this investigation travels. Ready to look closer? Good. Because the deeper we go, the more this illusion starts to crack. And somewhere behind the smoke and the precision, the truth is waiting. Let's open the first door. The Glencroft estate sat on a hill like a monument to wealth frozen in time. Ivy curled around the wrought iron balconies. The morning mist clung to the grass like a lover unwilling to let go. Inside, chandeliers flickered nervously overhead, as if aware that something sacred had been violated. I walked the central corridor slowly, letting the silence weigh me down. I always make my first pass alone, before the scene is contaminated by theories and egos. The vault room was buried deep beneath the east wing. Reinforced concrete, airtight, designed by Julian Vexley himself, the same man now lying sedated in the infirmary upstairs. 2 cameras watched the vault door, one facing directly, one from a high diagonal angle in the corridor. Neither had been tampered with. They showed Julian entering the vault at 3:11 a.m., carrying his inspection tablet. The diamond was logged, vitals stable. 14 minutes later, a static flicker, then nothing. Julian was found on the floor at 3:49. The time gap, 24 minutes. In that sliver of time, the most valuable object on the estate had disappeared. The diamond case inside the vault, a transparent, climate-controlled cube of reinforced polycarbonate, sat empty, its lock intact, glass unscratched, no forced entry, no bypass signal. Even the biometric logs showed no second user access, no thumbprint, no iris, and yet the diamond was gone. I moved slowly through the room, listening, not with ears, but with instinct. I watched the temperature gauge, steady at 18.2 degrees Celsius, pressure seals intact. I knelt and studied the air vent. Filters pristine, no sign of tampering. I examined the floor beneath the pedestal. No hollows, no panels. But there, faintly, a single thread, silver gray, nylon, industrial, not household. I made a note in my pocket journal. Someone had been here, not just physically, but mentally. This was no smash and grab. This was elegance. This was artistry. Whoever had done this had planned for months, maybe years, and they'd rehearsed more than once. I glanced up at the ceiling panel, the one with the smudge. It was recessed, no visible screws, just a magnetic frame, seamless. The estate's owner, Lady Veronica Lorne, arrived behind me with 2 guards, and the huff of someone who thinks time should wait for her. "Detective," she said with disdain, "I trust you'll wrap this up quickly. The press is becoming a problem." I smiled without smiling. "I tend to work at the speed of lies unraveling, Lady Lorne. It's rarely quick." She scowled, but didn't press. She was hiding something. I could feel it in her cadence, too rehearsed. I asked to see the building's full schematic. She flinched. "That's sensitive information. So is a vanished diamond," I replied. The estate's head of maintenance, a wiry man named Reginald Pike, brought the blueprints. They were dated, but detailed. According to the plan, the ceiling panel in the vault was connected to a narrow crawl space, only 20 inches high, but long enough to reach the eastern storage corridor, and from there, a service stairwell. I followed the path myself. It was dusty, undisturbed, at least until halfway through. Then the prints started. Faint knee imprints, not shoes. Someone had crawled through slowly, deliberately. I found a torn patch of cloth snagged on a bolt, midnight blue, velvet, expensive. Not work clothes, not uniform, but familiar. I'd seen that fabric before, upstairs, in Lady Lorne's private lounge. I returned to the vault and stood once more before the empty pedestal. The room was pristine, but now it whispered a different story. Someone had entered not by breaking in, but by slipping through the walls of expectation. A magician's trick, executed with surgical precision. As I climbed the stairs, I knew two things. First, the diamond was no longer on the estate, and second, someone in this house knew exactly how it disappeared. The vault hadn't been broken. It had been obeyed. And that meant the criminal didn't fight the system. They were the system.
Lady Veronica Lorne was the kind of woman who rehearsed her grief before wearing it. When I entered her private lounge, she was already seated by the fireplace, a crystal glass of something amber in her hand, staring into the flames like a widow in a portrait. Draped over the arm of the leather settee was a velvet shawl, midnight blue, identical to the torn scrap I found in the crawl space. Coincidence? Possibly, but I don't believe in those. "Do you suspect me, detective?" she asked, without looking at me. Her tone was the kind aristocrats reserve for waiters who bring the wrong wine. I remained standing. "I suspect everyone, but velvet tears easily, and yours seems to be missing a corner." That made her blink, just once. Then she sipped her drink and leaned back, a trace of steel behind her gaze. "Velvet is terribly delicate," she said. "But I haven't been in the lower levels in months. Dust makes me cough." She was lying. Not because I knew what she was hiding, but because she was hiding too well. No one is that prepared unless they're already playing defense. "Tell me about Julian Vexley," I said. "You hired him to design the vault." Her fingers tensed around the glass. "Julian was recommended by our security firm. Brilliant man. A little too rigid, perhaps. Very solitary." She said solitary the way people say unpredictable. "Any personal relationship?" I asked. She laughed, cold, short. "With an engineer, hardly." yet her eyes flicked for just a second toward a photo frame on the shelf. A group shot from the estate's summer gala. There he was, Julian, standing behind her, just out of frame, but leaning slightly forward, as if pulled toward her by instinct. Her hand, draped over the shoulder of another guest, seemed almost to reach for him. Downstairs, the forensics team had finished their sweep. Nothing. No fingerprints, no hair, no fabric fibers beyond what I'd already found. But one detail caught my eye. The biometric pad on the vault had been reset at 3:45 a.m., 2 minutes before Julian Vexley was found unconscious. Reset, not accessed. That required Level 3 authorization. Only 2 people held that, Julian and Lady Lorne.
I returned to the lounge. She was still by the fire, but the glass was now empty. I held up a copy of the security logs. You accessed the system at 3:45. Her eyes narrowed. I did not. Then someone used your credentials. She didn't answer. There's no forced entry, I said quietly. No exit trail, no window opened. Whoever took the diamond knew this house, this system, this staff. Who did you let close enough to use your access without raising suspicion? She stood, slow, measured. Detective, I think you should go. That's not a no. It's a warning. She moved toward the window, pulling the curtains aside just enough for light to hit the velvet shawl and the deep tear near the edge. Her fingers rested on it as if bracing for something. There are truths here that will bury more than reputations, she whispered. Some treasures are better lost. I left the lounge with more questions than answers, but one truth was becoming clear. Lady Lorne wasn't the mastermind. She was the door. Someone else had used her, her access, her distractions. Someone close, someone familiar with her habits and Julian's systems. Someone with the technical skill and the emotional leverage. The next logical step was the staff. Discreet interviews, background checks, but also reactions. Most people lie with their words, a few lie with their posture, but the rarest lie with silence. In the hallway outside the servants' quarters, I passed a young maid, downcast eyes, trembling fingers. She didn't speak, but her hands, smudged with grease and something pale, clenched the hem of her apron like she was holding back a scream. I made a note. Interview the maid. But first, I needed to confirm something. I returned to Julian's infirmary room. He was awake now, groggy but aware. His lips were cracked. Julian, I said softly, what's the last thing you remember? He turned his head slowly and whispered, I saw her shoes. I frowned. Whose? He didn't answer, but his hand, weak and trembling, reached toward the sheet and traced a shape, a triangle, velvet blue.
Blueprints don't lie. People do. That's something I learned early in my career. A truth as solid as concrete and as sharp as regret. When someone tells you there's no way in or out, always check the plans. Because every architect leaves fingerprints. Every system has seams. I returned to the maintenance office, where Reginald Pike kept the estate's original architectural records, hoping that in between the dust and ink, I'd find a doorway no one wanted me to see. The office was cluttered with rolled scrolls, electrical diagrams, circuit logs, and a dozen mismatched mugs. Pike stood hunched over a terminal, typing with 2 fingers and squinting like the screen owed him money. He didn't hear me enter. When he finally noticed me, he jumped. "Detective?" he muttered. "If this is about the panel again, it's not." I interrupted. "I need access to the foundation schematics pre-renovation, before the vault was added." He hesitated, scratching the back of his neck. "That's going back nearly 30 years, before the lady took over. You think this has something to do with the old estate?" I nodded. "I think this crime was planted long before last night, and someone knew which roots to cut." He rummaged through a battered drawer and pulled out a curled yellowing sheet labeled Estate Substructure 1987. "You didn't get this from me," he muttered. "Wouldn't dream of it," I said. Laid out on the table, the plans told a different story. The room where the vault now sat was once a small wine cellar. And more importantly, it connected to a forgotten dumbwaiter shaft, sealed off decades ago. According to the blueprint, the shaft ran vertically through the east wing, up past the service hall, and terminated behind a library bookshelf on the 2nd floor. No one had mentioned that passage. No one even acknowledged it existed. I followed the trail myself. The library was empty. Carved wood, ancient books, and that smell of paper turning to dust. In the far corner, a grandfather clock ticked in rhythm with my thoughts. I pulled at the bookshelf, examining the back panel. A faint groove ran along the side, almost imperceptible. I pressed. Click. A soft mechanical release whispered open, revealing a narrow space lined with cobwebs and the stale breath of forgotten air. The shaft was tighter than I expected. Metal rails rusted with time, but recent scratches, fresh and vertical, ran down one side, like something had been lowered or raised. I shone my flashlight down the shaft, no bottom in sight. I lowered a tape measure, 36 feet. It lined up with the vault's ceiling. The service crawl space from earlier wasn't the only entry point. This one had been disguised for decades, a back door through the skeleton of the house. As I emerged from the library, I spotted the young maid again. This time, she wasn't alone. A tall man in a black suit was speaking to her in a low, sharp tone. When he saw me, he turned and walked off. The maid's eyes darted between me and the hallway. I approached slowly. "I need to ask you something. I think you saw something. Maybe not the crime itself, but something strange, out of place. Will you talk?" She hesitated. Her name was Eliza, 17, new to the estate from the village down the hill. She finally whispered, "I heard voices the night it happened, around 3:30. I was changing linens in the East Hall." "Voices?" I asked. "Whose?" She shook her head. "A man and a woman. The man was angry. The woman said, 'You said it would be clean, silent.' Then footsteps, and something being wheeled, like a cart. Then silence." I thanked her and wrote it all down. The woman's voice didn't sound like Lady Lorne. Too sharp, too urgent. And the man wasn't Julian. That left only one likely candidate, someone not yet on the suspect list.
I requested the full staff roster for the estates last month. Among gardeners, chefs, and security, one name stood out: Dorian Vale, estate tech consultant, recently hired. No references, no past contracts, just a name and a dark suit. The diamond hadn't walked out the front door. It had been lowered through a shaft no one remembered, wheeled across service halls in silence, and then handed to someone who knew exactly how to leave without a trace. I had a ghost in the system, and now I had a name. It was time to find Dorian Vale, before he vanished like the gem he chased.
Dorian Vale. A name that rolled off the tongue like a pseudonym. Clean, crisp, unassuming. And yet, when I ran it through every law enforcement, intelligence, and corporate database I had access to, it came back with the same answer. Nothing. Not blank, not redacted, just empty. No tax records, no school, no license, not even a digital footprint. In today's world, that's more suspicious than a rap sheet. I visited the estate's server room, tucked behind the west wing, accessible only with high clearance. Pike let me in reluctantly, muttering about ghosts in machines. I wasn't interested in ghosts. I was interested in Dorian's access logs. What I found sent a chill down my spine. Vale had logged into the estate network 6 times since his hire, always between 3 and 4 a.m., always remotely. And on the night of the heist, a full access session at 3:34 a.m. That access allowed him to override internal door locks, shut off hallway sensors, and critically, engage a false biometric echo protocol. It was a feature buried in the code, designed for simulations. But in the wrong hands, it could make the system think it saw a fingerprint, think it scanned a retina. That explained how the vault recorded Julian's credentials, even while he was unconscious on the floor. There was just one problem. Dorian Vale had vanished. His quarters were stripped bare, no suitcase, no toiletries, no sign he'd ever unpacked. His bed hadn't been slept in. I questioned the staff. No one had seen him in over 48 hours. Lady Lorne tried to feign surprise, poorly. We hired him through a third-party contractor, she insisted. He was temporary. No one that invisible is temporary. I asked Pike for the estate's external access logs. He hesitated. They're archived on a cold server, not regularly backed up, could take hours to extract. Then start now, I said, and bring coffee. While he dug through the digital underworld, I revisited Julian. He was stronger now, able to sit up. Did you know Dorian Vale? I asked. He hesitated. He was quiet, observant, knew the system too well. I thought he was ex-MI6 or something. Did you trust him? I asked. Julian stared out the window. I don't trust anyone who smiles while they code. I smiled at that, he added. He knew the blueprint, not just the digital one, the original. I caught him one night scanning it in the maintenance room. Said he was updating documentation, but he had gloves on. No one wears gloves at 2 a.m. for updates. Another detail, another crack in the perfect facade.
Then Pike called, "You're gonna want to see this." I returned to the server room. On screen, a data log from 4:12 a.m., 12 minutes after the vault went dark. An encrypted signal had pinged the estate's rooftop satellite uplink. Duration, 7 seconds. Target, an anonymous node on the dark web. Packet size, 44 megabytes. Enough to contain the vault's camera logs and biometric history. Evidence. Someone had exported the crime scene. I climbed to the rooftop myself. The uplink was still warm to the touch, meaning someone had physically been there recently. A footprint in the gravel, size 10, lug sole. I traced it to the edge. From there, the estate grounds fell away into thick forest. No cameras, no motion sensors, just trees and fog. If Dorian had escaped that way, he was a ghost with a compass. But ghosts leave trails. I checked the estate's vehicle logs. A maintenance van had been signed out at 4:23 a.m. by a badge ID tagged to R. Pike. Only Pike swore he hadn't used his badge that day. The card had been cloned, and the van still missing. I contacted local authorities to scan border checkpoints for that plate, but I already knew. Dorian was gone, the diamond likely with him, but not without risk. He had sent data somewhere, and that meant he had leverage, or enemies. As the sun dipped behind the hills of Glencroft, I stared out over the estate grounds. Somewhere out there, Dorian Vale was planning his next move. But now I had a name, a method, a motive. What I didn't yet have was his partner, because Dorian didn't work alone. And the diamond, I was starting to suspect, wasn't the only thing stolen that night.
Confessions are never clean. They're not delivered like birthday cards or wedding vows. They bleed, they twist, they bargain. So when Lady Veronica Lorne called me to her study and said she was ready to confess, I didn't bring a recorder. I brought questions. She sat by the window again, same velvet shawl, same empty glass. Her eyes met mine and she said, "I knew about the shaft." I didn't ask how. I just waited. People fill silence with guilt. She said she'd discovered it during renovations years ago, that she'd used it once to escape a charity dinner, that she'd meant to report it but forgot. Lie. You don't forget secret exits in vault rooms. I told her so. She didn't argue. I asked if she'd given anyone access to it. She said no, but her voice cracked, tiny, involuntary, like a thread pulled too tight. "You're protecting someone," I said. She stared at her hands, then whispered, "I didn't know he'd take it. He said it was a test." "A test?" I asked. "He said no one would get hurt, that if he could do it and return it, he'd prove he was better than the ghosts." "Vale," she nodded. "He promised to bring it back before dawn." I leaned back. Her version didn't match the evidence. Dorian hadn't just taken the diamond. He'd exported every log, erased every trace. This wasn't a test. It was a message. Someone taught him to think like that. Someone shaped his need to prove he could outsmart the system. "Tell me," I asked, "how long had you known him?" "Longer than the staff thought." "He wasn't hired through a contractor, was he?" "No," she said. "He came to me directly. She met him at an auction, years ago. He disappeared after the war, resurfaced in Vienna, a different name, a different voice, but she recognized him, not by his face, but by his mind. They began corresponding, months of cryptic letters and encrypted emails. He promised he could help her protect the estate, that only someone who understood how to break systems could truly secure them. She believed him and gave him access. He didn't just design the bypass, he designed the whole system.
"You were in love with him," I said. She didn't answer, but the silence was loud enough. "He lied to you," I added, "and you lied to everyone else." She nodded once, tearless. "What do you want me to do?" "Tell the truth," I said, "or what's left of it. And surrender the letter he left, the one you're hiding." Her lips parted, barely, and she reached into the side drawer. A single envelope, unmarked, but heavy with consequence. The letter was brief, handwritten, no signature. It read, "The vault was never the prize, only the mirror. I just wanted to see if they'd watch it vanish and still blame the wrong people. I didn't steal the diamond, I set it free. Delusion or design, but it was clear Dorian wasn't after wealth. He was after proof. Proof that control is just the illusion of permission." I left Lady Lorne in her study, clutching the empty envelope like it still held his touch. Downstairs, the police were waiting. I handed them the logs, the blueprints, the recordings. She gave him the tools. He built the myth. Now they'd both face the echoes. Justice rarely feels clean, but sometimes it's loud enough to be heard. Before leaving, I checked Julian one last time. He was sitting up, flipping through a notebook. He looked up. "You catch him?" "Not yet," I said, "but I'm closing in." He nodded. "Tell me when you do. I want to see the face of the man who erased me." Outside, rain had begun to fall. The kind of rain that feels like punctuation. Final, steady, unarguable. I lit a match, not for a cigarette, but for memory. As the flame danced, I wondered, did Dorian ever exist, or did someone create him? A system, a shadow, a story with teeth. The heart of Andara was gone, but the vault, the estate, the people, they'd never forget how it vanished, and neither would I.
Not every case ends with handcuffs. Some end with a whisper, a letter, a silence too heavy to lift. Dorian Vale disappeared into the fog, like a story no one wrote down. The heart of Andara was never recovered, at least not by the people who insured it. And Lady Lorne? Well, she no longer hosts galas. She now lives behind gates. Not bars, but they still lock. The estate installed new systems, new cameras, new protocols, but no one feels safe. Not really. Because once you see how easy it is to erase a trail, to disappear between walls, you don't forget. Julian Vexley transferred to another firm, more private, more secure. He doesn't talk about the vault, not even in whispers. As for me, I closed the file, but I never shelved it. Some mysteries don't end. They echo. In dreams, in reflections, in vaults built too perfectly. I still ask myself, what was the real motive? The diamond or the performance? And sometimes I think the answer was both. Some crimes steal more than objects. They steal certainty. And those are the ones that stay with you.